Hi, I'm Femi OK and you're in the stream. Today, is education an investment into your future that needs to be paid for, or should it be free if you want to study? Europe is divided over the issue as students continue to protest. Kudos, audience. You're so well educated. This is such a universal subject. Omar Badar is sitting in here for Malika Bilal this week. What are you seeing? There's great conversation going on online already, Omar.
It is, and a lot of people are frustrated with the rising costs of education. We asked what kind of impact that is having, and you have Patrick here who tweeted in saying it has drastically reduced the number of students that apply for higher education in schools now. Then we asked if that education should be free. And Lukuma Lily here says, yes, a college education shouldn't cost as much as a house or a car. God knows in some schools it probably costs even more than that. For those of you at home, you can tweet us using the hashtag AJStream to join this conversation, and we'll get to those tweets during the show. And
remember, you can head over to Facebook and like our Facebook page. You can send us some comments and questions for the show of the day, as well as suggest topics making news in your part of the world. Scroll down, you'll find plenty of space there, and you too could end up in the stream.
Hi, I'm Brad Dacus, president of the Pacific Justice Institute, and I'm in the stream.
Is higher education a debt sentence? In Europe, students are saying yes. In England, students graduate with around about £44,000 worth of debt. That's more than $60,000 and the highest student debt in the whole of Europe. Thousands of students protested last month calling for free education. They claim that they suffer with higher tuition fees, graduate with a burden of loans that they will never be able to pay off, and the university is only accessible to upper classes who can afford the high costs. In many countries where tuition fees are low, living costs are sky high. Critics argue that to have higher education, students must pay. If they don't, the quality will suffer. But Germany is often looked to as a model. Higher education is now completely free of cost to European and international students. So what is the best way forward? Lower tuition fees, subsidised living for students, or maybe forgoing university for apprenticeships? Joining us to talk about these issues from Lincolnshire in the UK, Mike Neary is a sociology professor at the University of Lincoln and a founding member of the Social Science Centre. From London, we have Tom King. Hello there. He's a student activist and an officer in the Student Union at the School of Oriental and African Studies, or SOAS. Also in London, Hannah Sketchley, an activist with a national campaign against fees and cuts. And from Toronto, Canada, Alex Usher, a president of the Higher Education Strategy Associates. So great to have you all here in the stream, everybody. Let me tell you that Tom is in his finals. He hasn't started revision yet. He is writing his essays. We believe him. Tom, but debt. Student debt, how much do you have right now, if any?
I think by the end of this year when I'm graduating, it will be about £40,000. And so students now are sort of graduating where that amount of debt is kind of like the norm. 44,000 is the average. Tuition fees here are now £9,000 a year. So you're starting off and you've already got a sort of mortgage-sized debt around your house, around your neck before you even kind of like started off in life.
How does that even pile up?
Well, so, you know, you've got your tuition fees and then you also get a kind of maintenance loan, which is sort of for you to live off. And so, you know, when you're studying for 3 or 4 years, that soon quickly adds up to a huge kind of pile of debt.
When you look at your bank account, Tom, and then you see
Scary.
how do you even compute that?
Well, yeah, it's kind of a bit far away because it's, you know, the government kind of lends you this money and then they send you a statement every year with how much, and it's kind of just a figure that you can't even really understand.
All right. Hannah,
it's that big.
Yeah, Hannah, how's your bank account looking right now? You've graduated. Do you owe the government anything?
I owe the government, I think, sort of between £30,000 and £35,000.
Wow.
Because I luckily got in on the £3,000 fees, and I studied in Europe for 1 year, so I didn't pay tuition fees then. But yeah, I haven't started paying off my all of the debt that I owe yet because I'll start paying that off in April. But even on sort of a reasonable salary at the moment, like I can't contemplate what taking a lot of chunk out of that to pay off my student debt is going to do to like my disposable income.
Right, absolutely. Omar.
So we have people also weighing in on this debt, basically how it's affecting their lives. We have Krista here who says, even if when I had a salary, I'm still struggling to pay rent because of the debt. On the other hand, you have Sarah here who says, I have student debt, but don't mind it. The value of an education is not measured in currency. No one can take that away from you. Alex, do you think a good education is worth accumulating a lot of debt?
Depends on the type of education, and it depends on the terms of the debt repayment. One of the things that's very unique about the English system that you've been hearing about with the last two guests is that it's not like it isn't like a mortgage loan. The maximum that they can ask you to repay in any given year is 9% on income over £21,000. And an awful lot of that debt, at least the way it's designed right now, is meant to be forgiven. So I think on the most recent estimates, about 45% of all debt the government is going to end up writing off at the end of the period of loan. So those amounts sound onerous, and I'm sure I wouldn't want to start my career with that kind of load or that kind of thing hanging around my neck, but it is the case that in fact most people will not pay off anywhere near that amount at the end of the day.
See, Mike, when you heard Tom and Hannah talking about how many thousands of pounds worth that they actually owed the government from their student loans, is that an argument for there to be free education, or for education to be paid as tax? Or is it an argument for most people to go, well, I don't want to pay 35,000 for Hannah's education. I don't want to pay 40 grand for Tom's. I'm glad that they had to pay that. Which way do you fall in that debate?
Yes. Well, I think before we can answer that question, we have to ask another question, a more fundamental question. And that question is, what is the meaning and purpose of higher education? What are universities for? And I think universities are for the production of knowledge and understanding and meaning for the benefit of society as a whole. So that's a general interest that the university, I think, should be concerned about. What's happened with the modern capitalist university is that the production of knowledge and meaning has become a privatized, a commercialized, a marketized activity. And in that way, it loses its universal characteristic. So the student is put in the position of student as consumer. And I think that
so Mike, do you think the UK government right now is making money off Tom and Hannah? Or will they have to forgive them this huge debt? I mean, Tom's 40 grand. That you could put that down for a house right now, Tom.
Yes.
Yeah,
well, I think, yes. I'm sorry. No, you go ahead, Tom.
And I think what Alex was saying is that this is such a huge amount of debt that they've loaded onto students that actually it means that as a way of funding higher education, it just isn't sustainable. They've already opened up a huge black hole in the budget because this debt is just huge and students can't pay it back. So, I think what Mike is saying is absolutely right. We need to ask more fundamental questions about who education is for, what education is for. And I think the conversations that we're having around free education have allowed us to ask those questions.
How would you answer those questions, Tom? You're sitting there, you're almost finished your education. How would you answer that?
Yeah. I think the impact of fees has been to sort of position us as consumers of a product rather than as kind of like students and scholars and academics. And it's turned universities into a business, and they're a marketized system where they have to compete against each other, and also a market-focused system. So because you have this huge debt, you know that you have to get a degree and then get a job. You're not focusing on kind of spending your time, really engaging with the topics that you're doing, on enriching your academic understanding. Can I tick the right boxes so that I can get a job to pay off this debt that I've accumulated? And that's, really not what university should be about.
The alternative to that debt is free education, and we asked what kind of impact that would have on places. Saf tweeted in saying, lots of pros for free education, a literate society, less crime, innovation, and so on. The only con will be for people who are in the education business. But we also have this video comment from Dominic. Take a listen to this.
What do you think it means for a country to get rid of its tuition fees? What effect has it on the economy? What effect has it on the universities? That is something that goes through my mind when I think of implementing that in other countries as well.
Alex, what is your sense? If education were to become free, what is the immediate impact?
But in most countries, what it means is a fairly large windfall to kids from upper middle class families. Regardless of where tuition fees are, in whether you're in Sweden or Finland where tuition is free, whether you're in the United States or Canada or the UK, the social makeup of the student body is pretty similar. And therefore, if you at a stroke say we're going to make tuition free, by and large what that means is the beneficiaries will be from upper middle class families. There are, I would argue, better ways. If what you're worried about is giving a hand up to people at the bottom of the social strata, more targeted interventions like grants for needier students is a much more effective way of doing that.
So what do you make of what Germany's done, where not only students within Germany, students around Europe and international students, as long as they reach the criteria for the university, they can study in Germany and the taxpayers in Germany pay for that?
Right. Well, I mean, I think for domestic students, one thing that you see is that you have fairly low levels of access. I mean, compared to North America or compared to Scandinavia, the percentage of students of youth in Germany who go on to university is quite low, and one of the reasons for that is because they don't supplement public funding with private funding. Private funding helps universities grow. It's a source of income. That was true in the United Kingdom. Participation rates are much higher than they were before tuition fees were introduced in England. So, I think tuition is important in that respect.
See, Hannah, when I went to university, I had a university grant. I didn't actually have to pay my tuition fees. My university accommodation was taken care of. I went to school in the UK. And that all changed. And now we have a system where you owe an awful lot of money back to the government. You're actually running a campaign right now asking students to protest about the current status quo. What is it that you want?
So I think that we have to be very clear that when we talk about free education, we're not just asking for me not to have to pay tuition fees. We are also asking for the scrapping of fees for vocational courses and colleges, the ending of cuts to college courses, which aid social mobility as much, if not more, than universities. We're asking for the liberation of curriculum, and I think one of the most important things that we really need to shout about is that we're asking for living grants at a living wage, so that people don't have to work day and night in horrible low-paid jobs just to be able to fund their studies, like most students I know do.
Sure. See, I see Tom nodding. Tom, is this even realistic?
Yeah, absolutely. And you were saying sort of when you were at university, that you got kind of a grant to go to university and that there were no fees. And this was kind of like 15 years ago in the UK. So it is possible. And we've seen in Germany that you can go from having tuition fees introduced to getting rid of them. And what Hannah's saying about living grants is really so important, because at the moment, most of my debt actually is from my maintenance loan, my living loan. I get about £7,000 a year, which to live on in London is absolutely no money. So I've had to work part-time. I'm still kind of barely scraping by with paying the rent and transport costs, which is just astronomical. And I'm in debt for that privilege of kind of, scraping by. So we really need to kind of fundamentally rethink it. And if there was proper universal kind of living support for students, then I think that would really improve access. And then getting rid of 9k fees, £9,000 is for some kind of working class kids more than their household earns in a year. That's like an unimaginable fee. And then if you think that they're going to get 3 times that in debt plus their maintenance loan, why on earth does that seem an attractive prospect to anybody?
Well, we have Lisa here on Facebook who commented and who disagrees. She says, I don't think education should be free, even though it was a tough time for me and I had to get student loans. It motivated me to study harder. Mike, what do you argue? Yes. What do you say back to people who worry that if education is free, people won't be trying as hard at excelling in school?
Well, nothing is free in capitalist society, and education has to be paid for. And I think that higher education should be paid for through a progressive taxation system with no user contribution. So that's how it could be funded. So those who earn more.
But in terms of no direct cost to the person, in an individual way, if it's just paid for by taxes anyway, is there less motivation for the person who's not paying for it themselves individually?
Yes. Well, we have to be very careful about generalizing about a whole student population about what their motivation is. This is a very, very complex issue. So my argument is that we would have a free higher education system paid for by public progressive taxation, which the student, when they had left university would pay through the income tax regimes. That would be my model, with no user contribution. And I agree with with Tom and Hannah that there should also be a grant for students while they are at university to support them in paying their living costs. I think that's very, very important, actually.
See, Alex, you've looked at a lot of different higher education systems. Is there one where you've looked at and you said, that works, everybody is happy, the students aren't paying too much money, the community isn't paying too much money, that's a good system? What would be the ideal model for you?
There's no perfect system. I mean, everybody always wants, if they're universities, they want more money. If they're students, they want to pay less.
Yeah.
So I don't know any system where everybody's happy. That said, I mean, I think the kinds of systems that you see that have got the right kind of mix between fees and subsidies. I think that the Holland is not a bad system. There's some fees and a mostly loan-based system of student assistance. My own country, Canada, is ridiculously complicated, but it's not a bad system in terms of getting the balance right between public and private financing. I mean, one of the things in the UK that drives the discussion that makes it so weird is not so much that students are paying a lot, although that is certainly true. It's simply that there isn't a lot of public investment in higher education in England, and that sort of exacerbates things. It exacerbates institutions' need for education. If if England and the UK were investing publicly in higher education the way Canada or even the Netherlands did, there would not be need for the kind of fees that they have. You wouldn't have these weird debt arrangements. You'd probably have fees in the kind of £3,000, £4,000 level where they were prior to 2012, and that was probably not a bad mix. So actually, I would have said the UK between 2006 and 2012 was probably a pretty good mix too.
See, Hannah reeled off a whole load of demands that she would like for the student population to have. Do you feel that that's realistic? What would you sort of guide her towards, or the student population towards, and saying this is actually doable, this is what you should be pushing for?
Well, I mean, if I were a student leader, I'd certainly be pushing for the kinds of things Hannah's pushing for. But I mean, the important thing is, do they have a good? They have enough money to keep body and soul together? Do they have? Are they living reasonably comfortably? And obviously, students who live in London, which is an unbelievably expensive city, that's very difficult to do. So I understand the frustrations that are there. I mean, generally, though, if you look at cost of living and you look at the total package that's available to students, actually, students in the UK have more money on hand than students almost anywhere else in Europe. Now, that's a good thing because they've got more money to work with. The flip side is it's almost all in loans.
Yeah.
And obviously that can be
because it's not really their money. Have a lot of it, but it's not their money.
But what it means is that when they need the money, it's available for them. And that's not true everywhere. I think even a lot of the free tuition countries you see in Europe, so if I think about France, if I think about Germany or Austria, in fact, those social payments are not there. So they may not be paying tuition, but they have in some ways more difficulty than UK students in being able to put together rent and pay for food and those kinds of things.
Is that reassuring, Tom, hearing that comparison, and Hannah?
I think, like, to come back on that, while it is sort of within the system, while it is, true that you get a maintenance loan, there are several things that the maintenance loan depends on, which for a lot of people just isn't realistic. So I got, for example, I think in my last year, sort of £5,600. This was intended to cover me for a year of living in London.
Say that amount again. £560.
£5,600.
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
So that barely covered half of my rent.
Whoa. Okay.
The maintenance loan system basically, so it's just on your parents' income, but it doesn't take into account things like, what if your parents are unable to support you? Like, what if that income goes on other caring responsibilities?
Yeah.
What if you don't talk to your parents? Like, it depends on you living in a middle-class, stable, two-parent family where they're all incredibly supportive of you, which just isn't the case.
Hannah,
it's not functional.
Sure, Hannah, the point was you're still better off than a lot of students elsewhere in Europe. But let me just bring in the community here, Omar.
We have a comment all the way from Ghana, video comment. Take a listen to this.
Hello, my name is Kofi Eboa, and I'm speaking from Ghana. I work with Clean Team Ghana Limited and a member of Ghana Think Foundation. The question for me I will pose is rather, is the kind of education we are giving of good quality? What kind of education are we giving to people in the higher institutions? Are they going to be globally competitive? If yes, then we can answer the question as to whether it should be free or not. That should be settled first.
Yes, that's a good question. Can I answer that question?
Yeah, go ahead.
For it.
Can I answer the question?
Mike,
right?
Mike, we can't wait for you to answer the question. Go ahead. Keeping us on tenterhooks here. Mike, go ahead.
This is a very, very important question because I think there is something very specific about teaching and learning in higher education. And that is that higher education is about the production of knowledge and meaning. So the curriculum and the pedagogy in higher education should be orientated in that direction. For example, at the University of Lincoln, where I work, we involve students in the production of knowledge in collaboration with academics and other students, and we call this student as producer. And this is a very progressive model, I think, of higher education. So it's not just about the quality of teaching, but what is the pedagogical process on which that pedagogy is derived. So I think there is something very specific about teaching and learning in higher education, and that is about yes.
Do you think we're too stuck in this old model where we're trying to make an old model work for current students? And are there better ways that we can actually get higher education?
Well, I think there are alternatives. And in the city of Lincoln, with colleagues and other students and activists and citizens in the city, we have created a cooperative enterprise in higher education. This has no formal connection to the University of Lincoln or any other university, but we have moved outside of the formal system and set up a cooperative which provides free education at the level of higher education. And we were set up about 4 years ago, and we currently have about 40 to 50 members.
Yeah.
The students pay no fee. The academics earn no salary. We develop our courses together in a joint way, and indeed we think that students and teachers have much to learn from each other. So in fact we don't refer to ourselves as teachers and students, but as scholars, to dissolve the distinction and the power relations as sociologists like to talk about. And we take our inspiration from critical pedagogies, critical pedagogists called people like Paulo Freire, who's a famous...
So Mike, if I'm a future employer looking at any of your scholars, would I actually think of their qualifications as a valid qualification? Just very quickly at the end of the show.
Yes, let me say, if I was an employer and we had students who were involved in running and managing a cooperative enterprise, then I would, as an employer, I would be very interested in those people who have been able to do that, because as part of the cooperative, the students run the cooperative. That's the point. They're not just students, and I think that's the model to go for in future.
All right, so Tom, you're almost at the end of your degree here. If you could do it all over again from the financial aspect, would you?
Yeah, I definitely think it's been worthwhile. You know, I do have this huge debt, and it would be ideal for students not to have it, but I do still think that, you know, for some people, higher education is definitely the best way to go.
Right, all right, good luck with paying that off. £40,000, almost $60,000, ouch. All right, Omar, last word from the community.
Last word from the community, we have Danny, who tweeted in saying, ignorance is a threat to any progressive endeavor. Any attempt to curb that ignorance should be encouraged. Free education is one such attempt.
All right, excellent. So we're not over yet. We're taking Mike Neary, he's a sociology professor at the University of Lincoln. We're taking Hannah Sketchley, she's done the national campaign against fees and cuts. Alex Usher, he's the president of Higher Education Strategy Associates. And also Tom King, he's a student activist and he's an officer in the SOAS Student Union. We are taking all of them to the post show, stream.aljazeera.com. We will see you there, hopefully. Until then, thanks for watching. Hello again, this is the Streams Online Post Show. Today we're discussing higher education and should it be free? Can it be free? Let's get right back to that conversation. So Mike, you were describing, this is an amazing situation where you've got this sort of vision for the future. Is this doable, scalable anywhere else, do you think?
Well, that's a very good question. The model at Lincoln, the Social Science Centre, Lincoln, we always intended that it would be fairly small. We'd have about 40 members. But we would create a real social institution that could be replicated in other subject areas and in other locations. And indeed, that has sort of happened in one or two in other parts of the country. In Liverpool, there already was a free university. In Brighton, they have a free university, and they are considering adopting a cooperative model. And indeed, we are now involved in a research project with my colleagues and students at Lincoln in developing this model, in looking at the kinds of constitutional frameworks that can become cooperative enterprises, and developing a rigorous and robust legal constitution, developing a business plan, and delivering a model of federation for transnational cooperative universities. And remember, there are already cooperative universities around the world. The most famous one is in northern Spain, which is the Mondragon University, and there are others. So in a sense, there's nothing really that new in what we are trying to do. There is a long history of cooperative education in England and elsewhere around the world. Sure. And the cooperative movement is a worldwide global movement. It's a very exciting and dynamic and successful movement. And as I said before, the key issue with the cooperative university is that students and academics run it together. They take the decisions together. It's a democratic model. And I think that's really important in challenging the free market political project that universities in England and elsewhere are currently being subjected to.
Sure. Alex, I'm not sure that you buy that as a model for higher education. What's your take on what Mike's just shared?
I'm sort of neutral on the pedagogy. I don't particularly think that a hierarchical model is limited to places where you have fees. I mean, I have a hard time thinking of more, hierarchical models than free universities in Germany or Russia or in sub-Saharan Africa or Asia, with places where there are free tuition. I mean, I think the hierarchy thing may be overdone. I mean, my argument about fees is, look, higher education is a lot like housing. We all want slightly different amounts of it. Not every, some people rent, some people buy. You have different sizes of house. We want everybody to be housed. We don't give out the housing for free. We find ways to subsidize people who can't pay for it themselves. And higher education is an awful lot like that, and it's because there are substantial private benefits to higher education.
Right.
People who go end up making a lot more money than people who don't.
Sure.
And while you want everybody to have that chance, you do not want those the chances to be limited by what your parents' circumstances are. Tom made that point earlier, and I think it's a good one. So you find ways to help them, but you don't need to make it free in order for that to happen.
While most of the concerns that are coming up in the community are about not having enough people have access to education, we actually have people who are raising the opposite concern of maybe too many people having access to education, interestingly enough. Nestle Han says, what will happen in a society if almost everyone is highly educated, demanding good wages? Who will settle for unskilled labor? And we have Thomas here, who also tweeted in saying, only if there is a lot less funding on the basis of aptitude. We need plumbers and baristas, not arts grads. Hannah, what do you say to people who are concerned that maybe education for too many people might not be a good idea?
I mean, most of the people who are full-time baristas I know are also arts grads, so I think that's a bit of a full stop, especially in today's job market.
This is true.
I would say that so again, I think it comes back to talking not just about the abolition of tuition fees, but entirely remodelling the education system.
Right.
We need fully functional vocational education and college education as much as we need free university education. And I also think, like, if your plumber has made a lot of money by, I don't know, well, either by, you know, being very good at plumbing or by having a sort of team of underpaid, like, plumbers underneath him, then why shouldn't he, like, be expected to contribute with the wealth that he's made for other people? Education is a social good and it benefits everybody. It ought to be funded by everybody.
All right, so Tom is nodding with great enthusiasm as you've been speaking there, Hannah. Yeah. Tom, this whole idea about where these student protests can go, what do you hope will happen?
What I hope will happen is that we, you know, carry on, you know, building, a bigger student movement, a more active student movement, you know, taking to the streets, taking direct action to, you know, to achieve the things we've been talking about, you know, to abolish tuition fees and to have a living grant. And actually, I've been really interested about what Mike was saying about this kind of more democratic model of kind of running universities, because at SOAS, what we've been doing is, you know, we were all kind of there were students that had problems, there were staff that had problems, and we all sat down together and joined the dots together. And actually, the problem was that there was a management at the top of our university that is trying to run the place like a business. And so what we've done is set up a campaign called Democratize SOAS, where we're seeking to, empower the whole community that makes up our university, and to give us a democratic say in the institution that we are all members of.
All right. So I'm going to say thank you to Mike and Alex and Tom and also Hannah. Thank you for being part of this higher education conversation. A lot more debate to be had. We're going to take it online to #AJStream. Thank you very much to all of our guests. Thank you for watching. I will see you online. Take care.